Good morning, everyone. We are going to be taking some grammar notes today on adjective and adverb form. A couple of things though before I begin. First, if you are trying to take notes on these slides, but you're noticing that the recording is maybe going too fast, you can always pause the video and jot down the notes that you need. Or I also embedded a link to just the slides without the video on the lesson plan document that I shared out with you. So just be aware that you have a couple of options as you're trying to take notes. Before I begin, I just want to talk to you about why we're taking these grammar notes. So first, I wanted to just give you a reminder of what adverbs are. Next, I want to talk to you about how adverbs and adjectives may change form depending on how they're being used in the sentence. We saw this happening too when we talked about pronoun case earlier in the year. So remember, with pronoun case, I could use pronouns me or I depending on how the sentence is formed. So in that situation, me or I is talking about the same person, but depending on how it's being used, it will change the form. The same is true for adjectives and adverbs. And then lastly, we'll talk about the difference between words good and well. So let's begin. So like I said, this first slide is just giving you a reminder of adverbs. So adjectives and adverbs are both modifying words. Adverbs, though, can be a little bit more tricky to identify and understand than adjectives. So just as a reminder, an adjective is a word or phrase that modifies verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs in the sentence. We can try to identify these words by answering the questions how, when, where, why, to what extent, how often, or how much. Another identifying feature of adverbs is some adverbs end in ly. However, this is not true to all adverbs. If we take a look at some adverbs in sentences, our example says, she thinks quick or she thinks quickly. Because this sentence will answer the question, how does she think? We know that we should use the adverb form quickly. The same is true about the second example. We performed bad or we performed badly. Again, it answers the question, how did we perform? So we know we should use the adverb badly. Now, the reason why we're talking about this is because, like I said earlier, adverbs and adjectives can change form depending on how they're being used in sentences. So today I want to talk to you about how we use them when we're forming comparisons in our sentences. Okay? When we are looking at these comparisons, they really require us to decide if we should use words like more or most. When we look at deciding between these words, we're actually looking at deciding between comparatives or superlatives. Now, these are both pretty big words, but we're going to talk about them more on the next few slides. So first, let's talk about comparatives. When we are comparing two things, we're talking about how they're different. So usually, to make this comparison, we would add er to the end of the adjective. An example of this, slow would become slower if we're comparing two items. We see this in the example. The chicken is slow, but the turtle is slower. In this example, we're comparing two items, the chicken and the turtle. Because there's only two items, that adjective becomes slower. Now, sometimes, though, it's just not logical to add er to the end of the adjective. We typically see this happen with words that have more than 3 syllables. Okay? When we see this happening and it's just not logical to add er, we can form the comparative by using the word more instead. Examples: amazing becomes more amazing. Logical becomes more logical. We would not say logicaler. That just doesn't make any sense. We can see that in this next example as well. John is intelligent, but Brett is even more intelligent. So in the sentence, we have two items that we're comparing, John and Brett. However, it doesn't make sense to say intelligenter. So we form that comparative by using more intelligent. Keep in mind, we would never use er and more at the same time. It's just not grammatically correct. So we'll never say that Brett is more intelligenter. Next, we're going to talk about the superlatives. When we're comparing 3 or more items in a sentence, we would usually add est to the adjective. An example, Louis is smarter than Paul, but George is the smartest. In this sentence, I'm using the comparative and the superlative. In the first half of the sentence, I'm only comparing 2 items, Louis and Paul, which is why the first smart ends in er. But by the time I get to the second smart, I'm going to use the superlative smartest because by the end of the sentence, I'm adding a 3rd item to the comparison. Now again, if it's not logical to add est to the end of the adjective, we would form the superlative by using the word most. We see that in our example. That car is the most expensive car that you can buy. We would not say that car is the expensivest car you can buy. It just doesn't make sense, so we form that superlative by using most instead. The last thing that I want to cover with you is using good versus well. So if we are describing a noun, we should use an adjective. Good is an adjective. In my example, it says, she told the dog that he was a good boy. In my example, the noun that we're describing is boy, and so I use that adjective good. However, if we are describing how something was done, we would use the adverb. Well is an adverb. In my example, it says, the speaker told the story well. Again, it answers that question. How was the story told? It was told well. And lastly, when we are referring to someone's health, we should use well. Example, I do not feel well today. When we're describing someone's emotional state, we should use good. Example, he doesn't feel good about cheating on that test. The next thing that we'll work on is doing some sentence correction sheets. If you have any questions though about anything that I covered in these notes, be sure to comment on this video or you can send me an email. Thanks for watching, everyone.